Imagine throwing away like $10,000 of premium dry-aged steak. Not because nobody ordered it and not because your refrigerator's broke, but just because the wind blew a little too hard 3 counties over.
Right, which sounds crazy, but it happens.
It really does.
Mhm.
Today we're diving into a document that proves the weather is, well, it's no longer just small talk or a cue to grab an umbrella. It is a highly volatile financial weapon.
What's fascinating here is that we usually consume weather forecasts so passively. We look for a rain icon to decide if we need a jacket. But the document we're analyzing today flips that entirely. It treats a weather system as a kinetic attack on supply chains, commercial infrastructure, and basically corporate profit margins.
Exactly. So, welcome to the deep dive. We are cracking open a hyper specific, highly detailed industry document today. It's the Hospitality Weather Alert and Energy Impact Briefing from GWT2Energy, and it's dated today, March 16th, 2026.
And for those who don't know, GWT2Energy is a firm that helps the restaurant and hospitality sector manage and ideally cut their energy costs.
Right. So, their briefing isn't just a meteorological summary, it's an operational battle plan. We are going to explore the immediate physical threats of the severe storms battering the East Coast right now, and then pivot to the bizarre thermal whiplash splitting the rest of the country.
The record heat versus the polar vortex.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, we're going to expose the massive hidden strain this puts on infrastructure and a business's bottom line.
The overarching theme of this briefing is predictability versus chaos. For a restaurant operating on razor-thin margins of, maybe 3 to 5%, chaos is incredibly expensive. And the first 7 days of this forecast, covering March 16th through the 22nd, are just the definition of operational chaos.
Yeah, let's start with that immediate threat. The brief targets the eastern half of the United States as the immediate bullseye for today and tomorrow. They outline a moderate risk zone, which is their highest active alert level right now.
Right, and that covers central Eastern Virginia, central Maryland, central North Carolina, and South Carolina.
And surrounding that is an enhanced risk area hitting the major population centers along the I-95 corridor. So you've got Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., down through Charlotte, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and into parts of Georgia and Florida.
The terminology used here, like moderate and enhanced risk, it can sound deceptively mild to a layperson. But the actual kinetic threats they are warning about are severe.
We're looking at damaging winds exceeding 75 miles per hour, large hail, and the potential for strong, long-track tornadoes.
Yeah, they attach a 40 to 50% likelihood of severe thunderstorms in those moderate zones, and a 5 to 15% chance of tornadoes.
Which is huge.
Right, because a 15% chance of rain means you might leave the umbrella at home. But a 15% chance of a long-track tornado tearing through a populated commercial zone, that is a massive red flag.
Absolutely. The brief throws out a clinical term here, warning of a 25 to 40% likelihood of, quote, operational disruption in these risk zones. But reading between the lines, when a brief says there's a 25 to 40% chance of operational disruption, what does that actually look like on the ground for a business?
Well, it doesn't just mean a manager has to lock the front door and flip the open sign to closed. We are talking about cascading effects. It's lost refrigeration, immediate health code violations, and frantically trying to secure backup generators. You really have to look at this through the lens of a regional franchise network.
Okay, how so?
Let's say you operate 50 restaurants across Virginia and Maryland. A 75-mile-per-hour wind event might only cause physical damage, like taking out a patio or destroying a sign at 3 of those locations.
Right.
But if that same wind system knocks out power at your centralized distribution hub or downs trees across the major interstate routes that your refrigerated trucks use,
Then all 50 of your restaurants are now experiencing operational disruption.
exactly, because the entire industry runs on just-in-time inventory. Restaurants don't have massive warehouses out back. They have walk-in coolers that need to be replenished every 2 to 3 days.
So if a truck can't deliver fresh produce, those restaurants can't serve their menu, even if the sun is shining at their specific location. It's like Mother Nature is handing out a pop quiz on your building's structural integrity, and the patio furniture is just the first test.
That's a great way to put it. And if a location loses power, the clock starts ticking instantly. Health codes mandate that perishable food has to be discarded if it sits above a certain temperature for just a few hours.
Wow.
So that $10,000 of premium steak you mentioned in the beginning, that isn't an exaggeration. A single prolonged power outage can wipe out a month's worth of profit for a high-volume restaurant entirely through inventory spoilage.
Which explains why the brief advises managers to monitor local National Weather Service alerts so aggressively. They need to know if they should preemptively rent a generator or start moving inventory.
Right, they have to get ahead of it.
Just to round out the physical threat picture, the brief does note that the tropics are quiet right now, with less than a 1% chance of any hurricane or tropical system impacting the continental U.S. in the next 21 days.
So the immediate physical danger is hyper-localized to these continental severe storms.
Right. But wind tears down the visible infrastructure, right? The signs, the power lines, the patios. As we move into the second phase of this GWT2Energy brief, here's where it gets really interesting. The focus shifts to an invisible attack on the building's internal organs.
The geographic and thermal whiplash described in this section is just staggering. And the brief explicitly defines what an extreme is, so operators aren't just guessing based on a feeling.
What's the exact definition they use?
They define an extreme as highs over 95 degrees Fahrenheit, lows under 40 degrees, or temperature departure of 15 degrees or more from the normal seasonal average for March.
And the departures we're seeing this week are historic. Out west, the Southwest is sitting under a suffocating heat dome. Phoenix and surrounding metro areas are hitting 98 degrees on Tuesday and then spiking to between 103 and 107 degrees from Wednesday through Saturday.
Yeah, the brief explicitly flags this as the earliest triple-digit heat on record, and they put a 70 to 90% likelihood on these hot extremes occurring.
Meanwhile, the north is experiencing the absolute inverse. A polar vortex cold plunge is dropping down, sending Minneapolis and Chicago plummeting to near 0 degrees, or at best, single digits.
Go crazy.
Even the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, right after those severe storms pass through, are expected to drop into the teens and low 20s. We hear about record heat all the time in the summer, especially in a place like Phoenix. But how much more dangerous or expensive is a 107-degree day in mid-March compared to mid-July?
Oh, it is a completely different mechanical reality. You have a massive swath of the country operating simultaneously in opposite extreme environments.
Yeah.
And it comes down to a concept the brief highlights called unseasoned systems.
Unseasoned systems.
Yeah. Think about the mechanics of a commercial heating, ventilation, and air conditioning unit. The big HVAC system on the roof of a massive restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
By mid-July, that system has been gradually introduced to the heat.
Okay, that makes sense.
Preventative maintenance has been done, the coils have been cleaned of spring debris, the refrigerant levels are balanced for high ambient temperatures, and the internal lubricants are at the proper viscosity. The system is seasoned.
So right now it's basically a mechanical cold start. If the machinery is unseasoned, it hasn't been prepped for peak demand.
Precisely.
Suddenly thrusting a dormant or lightly used commercial AC unit into maximum overdrive to fight a historic 107-degree March heat wave is, well, it's like trying to drive your car down the highway in second gear. It might move, but the engine is screaming and you are burning an absurd amount of gas just to maintain a normal speed.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the financial peril here. Because when an unseasoned compressor is suddenly forced to drop the internal temperature of a sweltering commercial kitchen by 30 or 40 degrees, the head pressure skyrockets.
And what does that do?
The machine has to draw significantly more electrical current, more amps, just to turn the motor.
Which leads us directly to the terrifying numbers the brief throws out for the operators in the Southwest. They're predicting a massive 20 to 40% drop in efficiency for these unseasoned AC systems facing the heat dome.
Yeah, that's huge.
And up north, it's the reverse problem. The intense, sudden heating loads from that polar vortex are going to cause potential strain or absolute failure on older heating units trying to fight off 0-degree temperatures.
Right.
Across all these affected zones, the brief warns there is a 50 to 70% chance of extreme energy spikes.
Think about your own home AC or heater struggling on the first really hot or cold day of the year. Now multiply that by an entire commercial kitchen and dining room. A 40% drop in efficiency means the system has to run 40% longer, consuming 40% more electricity, just to maintain the exact same 72-degree dining room temperature it achieved effortlessly a month ago. If we connect this to the bigger picture, extreme weather isn't just a comfort issue, it's an invisible tax. You are buying a massive amount of extra energy just to maintain the status quo.
And commercial buildings aren't just billed for the total amount of electricity they use like a residential house is, right? They often face peak demand charges.
Yes, exactly. Commercial electricity billing usually includes a charge based on the highest amount of power the building draws at any one specific moment during the billing cycle.
Oh, man. So if that unseasoned, overstressed HVAC unit draws a massive spike of electricity to kick on during the hottest hour of that 107-degree Wednesday.
It establishes a high peak demand limit. And the restaurant is then billed at that elevated rate for the entire month, even if the weather cools down the very next day.
That is brutal.
It is the invisible tax of extreme weather. This is why the brief aggressively recommends backup power solutions and tune-ups.
No wonder GWT2Energy is urging immediate HVAC checks in Phoenix, Minneapolis, Chicago, and the mid-Atlantic cities. They are telling operators to schedule preventive maintenance now to handle these wildly variable spring loads.
Because an inefficient system is incredibly expensive. But a failed system in 107-degree heat or 0-degree cold means you have to close your doors entirely.
Right. If the kitchen hits 115 degrees because the AC blew a capacitor, your staff cannot safely work and your revenue drops to zero.
The cost of preventative maintenance is negligible compared to the cost of a catastrophic failure during an extreme weather event. The brief is essentially screaming at operators to get ahead of the physics.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most strategic section of the briefing. We've mapped out this intense 7-day gauntlet, right? 75-mile-per-hour winds, 107-degree earliest ever heat, and a 0-degree polar vortex.
That's a lot.
If I'm an operator, I'm exhausted just looking at the next week. But businesses don't survive by only looking 7 days ahead. We need to examine the 14 to 21-day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, the CPC, to see if this volatility is the new normal. We need to look at what I'm calling the Great Thaw.
The Great Thaw, I like that. And the medium and long-term outlooks do offer a distinct shift in the narrative, moving away from volatility and toward stabilization.
Looking at the 14-day view, which covers March 23rd to the 29th, the brief notes a strong above-normal temperature signal emerging across the eastern U.S. with a 70 to 80% probability.
Right.
The extreme heat in the southwest finally starts to ease up, though it stays above average, and that harsh northern cold moderates. Crucially, the brief states there are no sustained extremes forecasted in this window, no more highs over 95 and no lows under 20.
Though they do note a 50 to 70% likelihood of a notable warm departure, meaning temperatures 15 degrees or more above the seasonal average in the east.
And stretching out to the 21-day view, from March 28th to April 10th, above normal temperatures are favored across most of the continental United States. The highest probabilities for that sustained warmth are along the Gulf Coast and the Mexican border.
And the chance of those extreme cold outbreaks drops to highly unlikely, coming in at less than 15%.
They even mention a silver lining for operators. The patios that are suffering and shutting down right now in the cold and storm zones will actually benefit from the sustained warmth later in the month.
It is a transition to a more uniform, predictable environment. And in business operations, predictability is the most valuable currency you can have.
So a 70 to 80% probability of above normal temperatures sounds nice if you want to sit on a patio with a drink. But for these energy managers who just survived a 40% efficiency drop, does above normal mean they actually get a breather? Or does this forecast just tell them they are permanently shifting their baseline operating costs higher for the rest of the spring?
That's the real question. The immediate existential risk of the extremes, the sudden 107-degree spikes that literally break the machines that vanishes. That is the breather.
Okay.
But the strategic levers you mentioned are exactly why this long-term forecast is included. Once a business knows the baseline temperature is going to be consistently above normal for the next 3 weeks, they shift from reactive survival to proactive optimization.
What does that proactive optimization look like on a corporate level?
Well, it dictates supply chain and commodity hedging. If energy managers know the 21-day outlook is warm across the entire continental U.S., they know natural gas and electricity demand for cooling will steadily rise.
So they buy ahead.
Exactly. They might lock in energy futures contracts now before the spot prices increase. And on a localized operational level, it changes inventory modeling. You shift your just-in-time deliveries away from heavy cold weather comfort foods and start aggressively stocking produce and cold beverages, anticipating the patio rush.
You'd adjust your labor models too, right? Scheduling more staff for those outdoor dining shifts. Yeah.
So forecasting allows businesses to shift from reactive panic, like tying down patio furniture and hunting for emergency HVAC repairmen, to proactive strategy. They can start dynamically pricing their menus or hedging their utility bills to offset the losses they took during the 7-day severe weather gauntlet.
The weather dictates the overhead, and the overhead dictates the strategy. Let's take a step back and look at the absolute barrage these operators are navigating based on this one single briefing.
It's intense.
In a 7-day window, they are fighting a multi-front war. They are facing 75-mile-per-hour winds and the threat of long-track tornadoes in the east, which threatens to completely sever their localized supply chains and spoil their inventory.
Right.
They are staring down an unprecedented, earliest ever 107-degree March heat dome in Phoenix. They are bracing for a near zero-degree polar vortex in Chicago. And all of it culminates in a massive, invisible stress test for their commercial HVAC systems, draining their energy budgets through peak demand charges and 40% efficiency drops.
It is a phenomenal amount of physical and financial stress placed on the infrastructure of the hospitality economy. And it really highlights how deeply interconnected meteorology and corporate finance have become.
It really forces you to look at a restaurant differently. So, to you listening right now, keep this in mind the next time you visit a business or go out to eat during a severe weather swing. While you might just be shaking off your umbrella or enjoying a surprisingly warm patio day in early April, there is a hidden high-stakes game of operational survival and energy management happening right above your head in the ceiling vents.
And that raises a critical final point for us to reflect on. This briefing is incredibly technical. It focuses relentlessly on the mechanical efficiency of compressors, the physical safety of outdoor signage, and the statistical probabilities of wind speed.
Yeah, lots of data.
Right. But consider the human economic element that trails right behind all of this data. How much does this invisible thermal whiplash and the resulting massive strain on the commercial energy grid quietly dictate our daily economic reality?
Wow, yeah.
The cost of that 40% efficiency drop in an overstressed air conditioning unit doesn't just disappear. It gets absorbed, calculated, and eventually passed down to the very prices printed on a local restaurant menu to cover those sudden efficiency drops. We are all participating in the economics of extreme weather, whether we read the forecast or not.
We really are. Mother Nature dictates the terms of the environment, but the consumer inevitably pays the overhead. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden intersection of extreme weather and business operations. Keep looking closely at the invisible systems running the world around you and stay curious.